If your house catches fire today, you'd dial 999. If you had a medical concern, you'd ring 111. But in the early 50s, if you lived in our street, the number you needed was Topsham 3333. Well, the people in our street and their relatives would need that. A big black dial phone sat on our small hall table, and huddled next to it was a colourful small wooden ski chalet with a slot in the top for coins. You see, Dad was a telephone installer, and we had the first, and for a while, the only telephone in our street. And we lived about halfway down the street at number 178. When researching telephones in the 1950s, I found 2 comments online that could almost have been written about our house. The first was, "The only phone I know of was one in the house opposite. We used to have to go and ask to use it if there was something important." And then this one. "People who had telephones would find neighbours knocking on the door to use the phone. A small box with a slot in the top for coins with a standard bit of bric-a-brac." Well, these 2 both describe our house perfectly. But being a child, I never understood why these mostly strangers had to come to our house to cry. Now I understand that our neighbours' big life events played out in our small hallway. People would be crying with joy over the news of a new baby being born, or with sadness over the news that someone had died. But I do recall the constant having to stop eating my meal to run up or down the street with bits of paper that relayed the happenings of our neighbours' friends and relatives' lives. A baby had been born, someone was in hospital, it was an anniversary, someone had died. Only 1 in 5 homes had a telephone in the early 50s, and those that did were usually in the very affluent areas, whereas we lived on a big council house estate, so definitely not an area where phones were commonplace. Our hallway became the village newsroom, the emergency centre, and a counselling room, all at once. So how did people who were not affluent enough to afford a home phone manage to stay in touch? It's difficult to imagine now, when we're constantly in touch at the click of a button, that people had to write to each other. And of course many didn't, so ties were broken. I recall the public service announcements on the radio at that time. The programme would stop and a man's voice would say something like this.
"Here is an important announcement. With Mr. Ron Hastings, last heard of at 27 Somerset Street in Bristol. Please contact St. James Hospital in London, where his mother, Mrs. Agnes Hastings, is seriously ill."
It always worried me. Was he still at that address? Had he heard it? Had he managed to get there? Was he on time? Did his mother die? And more importantly, and completely an enigma to me, how could he lose touch with his mum? Dad's life's work after he left the post office sorting room was in telecommunications, more specifically in the early days in telephone sales. Putting people in touch with each other was what he did for a living. Families could be separated by circumstance and communication could be painfully difficult. His work was part of a quiet revolution that meant fewer people had to rely on a message broadcast over the radio or passed from neighbour to neighbour. He was helping create the world in which families could simply pick up the phone and hear each other's voices. And hearing someone's voice might mean the difference between life and death. In 1976, he was involved in having a telephone box installed at Beachy Head. For those who don't know, Beachy Head has been and probably still is a suicide hotspot. Most telephone boxes were placed where people wanted to make calls. This one was placed where people might need to make one. The idea was simple. Someone standing alone at a cliff edge, overwhelmed by despair, might see the telephone and make a call instead. A husband, a wife, a parent, a friend, and the Samaritans whose number was displayed prominently. Someone, anyone, who would answer and remind them that they mattered. Just one conversation, one voice, one reason to pause. I think about the contrast. Dad helped bring telephones into people's homes so family could share births, weddings and celebrations. Yet here was a telephone intended for life's darkest moments. The same piece of technology served both purposes. Before every house had a telephone, our house, our hallway, carried the joy, the grief and the secrets of an entire street. A telephone could carry ordinary gossip or urgent news. It could reconnect distant relatives. And sometimes, just sometimes, it could save a life. Dad would probably have described it as simply another installation, but looking back, it feels to me that it captured the true purpose of communication. At the edge of hopelessness, it offered a connection. Using the telephone had an etiquette around it too. Long before FaceTime, back in the 70s, Dad showed me a range of phones on display in his office. One was lovely, I really wanted it. It was shaped like Mickey Mouse. But one was a phone that showed the caller and receiver's faces. But apparently these were a non-seller. No one wanted callers to see them. I remember my first mother-in-law. She would get dressed properly before making a telephone call, despite the fact that nobody could see her. Hair done, decent clothes on, ready for a conversation. The idea of appearing on a screen in rollers and a dressing gown would have horrified her. She wouldn't dial the number either. She'd wait for me to arrive on a Sunday afternoon, and I would have to make the connection, say the initial hellos, and then pass her the receiver, by which time she was sitting, all tidied up, ready to talk. Telephones themselves were governed by unwritten rules. Sunday was the accepted time for a catch-up. Long-distance calls could be expensive. People worked fixed hours, and there was a sense that weekdays belonged to work and family routines. Ringing someone for a casual chat on a Tuesday evening might feel intrusive. So the telephone was not a constant presence demanding attention. It was a carefully timed social occasion. Today, we carry phones in our pockets and think nothing of answering a call while walking the dog or in the supermarket or even if we're in the toilet sometimes. Yet, for all our technology, we may have lost something of the consideration that once surrounded communication. It's not just how communication technology changed, but how people's expectations of availability changed. My parents' generation brought telephones into the homes. My generation watched telephones become personal. I spent many an hour lying on the hall floor talking to boyfriends. Courting was conducted down the telephone wire, despite family being within hearing distance and often having to step over me to get around the house. Just one phone in the hall was at everybody's beck and call. Today's generation expects people to be reachable almost everywhere, almost all of the time. We carry computers in our pockets that can call almost anyone in the world within seconds. Yet somehow, when I see one of those old black phones, or even just hear the sound of the dial or the ring, I'm transported back to that hall telephone at number 178. That telephone was ours, but that telephone belonged to an entire street. And to a little girl forever running up and down the road with scraps of paper, Topsham 3333, I'll never forget that number. Has this look back in time brought memories back for you? Maybe you were the only phone in your street, or you were the family who had to knock to use the neighbour's phone. I'd love to hear if it has sparked something off in your memory. Once again, if you've stayed till the end, thank you. It really means a lot. If you've enjoyed it, please click the like button and subscribe to my channel where you'll find my other stories. In the meantime, happy rambling.